Gil Kerlikowske served as the Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection from 2014 to 2017 under the Obama administration. He was also the Seattle Chief of Police from 2001 to 2009, as well as Director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy from 2009 to 2014. Gil, thank you for being here.
Good, thanks.
Now, you have such a venerated career in law enforcement. What is it like to be retired?
You know, I don't feel like I'm retired at all. The fellowship here at the Kennedy School at Harvard has been terrific. Working with the students, having a wonderful group of liaisons, and then a group of fellows hasn't really left much time to feel like being retired.
Oh, well, there you go. What's been the highlight of your time here at Harvard so far?
Well, one is that having the study groups and this wide array of guests that we've had, everything from people from law enforcement to the former head of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, to two New York Times reporters. It's been a nice interaction with a wide array of people, not just undergraduates who, as you know, in the fellows program, we really concentrate on spending time with the undergrads, but then a wide array of others. And then you get to interact with faculty, you get to interact with community members. So, you know, it's been really a terrific experience.
I want to ask you about your time in the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Now, your time there was heralded as a new era of transparency. How would you describe the power of transparency?
Well, we know that in a law enforcement agency, and Customs and Border Protection is actually the largest federal law enforcement agency, 60,000 employees, 40,000 of whom are in law enforcement positions. Whether it's people coming through our ports of entry, there are 338 of those in the United States, 800 people overseas, or between our ports of entry, 21,000 United States Border Patrol agents. It's really important that they have good communication skills and a level of trust with the people they're dealing with. I mean, think about somebody coming into JFK or Logan from overseas, and it's their first trip to the United States. The first person they see is someone wearing a badge, a uniform, and is armed. In the country they came from, you know, that might not be a person that they would turn to for assistance or trust or even help. Here we want them to be able to turn to that customs official and ask for assistance and explain in a way that welcomes them to the United States, but also protects the country.
How did your time as the chief of the Seattle Police influence your decision-making process as the head of the agency?
Well, police chiefs are much closer to the ground, so you have to be much more responsive, whether it was in Buffalo or whether it was in Seattle, much more responsive to community members. You have to be much more open to the press. You have to be much more open to the local elected officials. At the federal level, you're really kind of isolated from that. There's a number of barriers, a number of layers that kind of protect you from that. I don't think that builds transparency. I don't think it builds in any kind of trust or relationship with the people that you're serving. As a federal official, you can say no comment. It's under investigation. You can do those kinds of things. At the local level, you could never get away with after an incident by being able to say, well, don't worry, it's all under investigation, or I'm not going to answer any questions. I wanted to bring that level of transparency from the state and local level to the federal government, and I think to a large extent we did that at Customs and Border Protection.
You also decided as the chief of the Seattle Police to put cameras in patrol units. Can you talk about that decision?
These are called dash cameras, and the union was very much opposed to that. It means that when they turn on their overhead emergency lights or they make a traffic stop, that the camera comes on and records both visually but also with a microphone that the officer is wearing what happened. people thought, well, this will just be used to catch officers doing something wrong. The reality is, and I think it's been proven time and again, is that the camera often exonerates an officer from an unfounded complaint and turns out to be more of a protective measure than one. Not that that didn't ever result in someone being disciplined, but the goal was protection.
Why did you decide not to implement cameras in the Border Patrol?
Well, the Border Patrol and what's changed, I think, in law enforcement since my Seattle time and putting the cameras on the dashboards of cars, what has changed are the things called body cameras. A variety of different cameras that can be either clipped to an officer's chest or hooked to their glasses, sunglasses, etc. And the body cameras for the Border Patrol did not work out very effectively. The Border Patrol operates in some pretty harsh environment, very high temperatures, a lot of dust, a lot of brush. So when we tested them in a variety of ways, Border Patrol agents running through the brush, the camera would often get knocked off if it was on their glasses. Also, within several months, the dust would permeate the camera system. So you'd end up having to find a camera that maybe would be a little more suitable to the environment the Border Patrol works in, which is very different than almost every law enforcement agency. So I think they're still looking at that, and I think it's still reasonable. The Border Patrol agents that tested the cameras did not have a problem with them, but they weren't really holding up to the environment.
Reports had surfaced showing collaboration between Border Patrol agents and vigilante militia groups. How do you make sense of that collaboration?
Well, there were a number of groups on the southwest border, and it actually isn't a very large number of people that say, gee, I want to volunteer to protect the border. Almost like a crime watch would in a city. Some of them try to take it much further than just being an observer. The other part is that it doesn't take long working in that environment to suddenly say, gee, this isn't as much fun as I thought it was going to be, being down on the border. The other is that I listened to the Border Patrol agents, and they would often talk about the fact that they have had months and months and months of training. They're in good physical condition, their equipment is very good, and they have to keep it intact. They weren't particularly impressed with those people that were coming down as wannabes or volunteers. So the relationship was really not one of cooperation.
How did you respond when you received a report from an independent task force criticizing the discipline process in the U.S. Customs and Border Protection as ineffective and broken?
So when I went to Customs and Border Protection, there was no internal affairs unit that had authority to investigate serious allegations. If you made an allegation against someone in Customs and Border Protection, it would be investigated either by the Inspector General's office, a separate body, or it would be investigated by agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It's commonly called ICE, and it is a separate body. Also from Customs and Border Protection. The Secretary, Jay Johnson, even before I got the job, after I'd been nominated, we had a conversation. I said, if you're going to hold me accountable for the 60,000 employees at CBP, I'm going to need the authority and the resources for an internal affairs unit. I was confirmed in March of 14. By August of that year, he had signed the authorization to start our own internal affairs with a number of experienced people and to get that going. So there was no question that not only was the discipline system broken, discipline system was kind of non-existent because it would take so long to get a complaint investigated and adjudicated. So the task force was one that I I asked Secretary Johnson for the authority to form an independent task force. Commissioner Bratton at the NYPD and the former administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, Karen Tandy, chaired that task force along with the Tucson police chief and the head of the New Jersey State Police and others. They put together and looked at the system, and as I had already concluded, it was broken. But you really need that kind of outside report, that outside force, especially if you're going to convince members of Congress to appropriate funds to hire additional people and to put some teeth into the policy.
And how would you evaluate the discipline system in the U.S. Customs and Border Protection in January 2017 when you retired?
Well, there are several things that made a significant change. One is that when it comes to using force, that information was really never publicly acknowledged or put out. So every month, the use of force information, the type of force that was used, what was the result, where did it occur, is put out on our website or on the website of CBP on a monthly basis. If an incident happens, a serious or significant incident, a commanding officer either from Customs and Border Protection or from the United States Border Patrol would hold a press conference within 24 hours. And that was after also giving out information or making a public release. That's pretty unheard of in the federal government. And also, just as I was leaving, the first ever annual discipline report of all of the different complaints and how they were adjudicated and what disciplinary action was taken was published.
How do you envision the direction of those reforms under the new administration?
I don't think that CBP can reverse those decisions on transparency. When you hold that agency against state and local police departments, you really kind of realize that they have to be in the same business of commenting on what happened. If something went wrong, they have to be able to say that publicly. They have to acknowledge that. They also have to be in a position to say, what are you going to do to repair this? And I think, probably one of the best examples of perhaps not doing it, several years ago, a person jumped the fence at the White House, entered into the East Room and was apprehended. It's very unlike any federal law enforcement agency to hold a press conference and to say, here's what happened, here's what we did, and here's what I'm going to do to repair or fix that situation in the future. That wasn't done, and the end result was that the head of the Secret Service left the organization. It caused a significant number of articles that would continue to be repeated. When we would handle things in Customs and Border Protection, trying to get that information out early, trying to explain what happened with the best available information that you have at the time can make a huge difference in how the public and frankly how the press perceives what occurred and what you're doing.
Do you think any of these reforms that you enacted can serve as a model to local and state police?
I think the local and state police have kind of served as a model to Customs and Border Protection. The heads of those law enforcement groups within that organization often attended a lot of training programs, the Army War College, the National Defense University, but it was very centered around the military. And that organization can benefit from that type of training, particularly planning, logistics, etc. But they're a law enforcement agency. And so they really weren't putting their people into the law enforcement training programs. The Police Executive Research Forum runs something here in the Boston area 4 times a year called the Senior Management Institute for Police. The FBI runs a number of programs called the National Executive Institute or the National Academy. We weren't sending people to those kinds of programs. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, now Customs and Border Protection has their law enforcement managers and executives attending many of those kinds of programs, and that's where they interact with state and local officials, along with actually federal officials from other organizations.
Do you see any issues with the militarization of the police, either with Border Patrol or in state and local forces?
I think that the militarization issue, particularly after watching some of the equipment and the uses of types of tactics in Ferguson, really brought that issue to the attention of the public. I'm not sure they really realized that law enforcement had that capacity or had that type of equipment. And I think you have to walk a very fine line on that. Demonstrations and protests are one thing, but we also know that they can get out of hand, as was the reason that I went to Buffalo after the World Trade Organization riots. That they can get out of hand, people can be injured, people can be killed. So having a certain amount of discipline, a certain amount of military tactics and equipment is going to be necessary. How and when that is used is also important. But you often see that type of equipment used on certain types of arrest situations in which the people are believed to be or known to be armed. Oftentimes the kind of armament that the criminals have today is pretty powerful and far different than the kind of armament that I would see as a young police officer 40 years ago.
You talked in another interview about the risks of giving hard equipment to police officers with respect to community relations. What did you mean by that?
Well, when I took over the Seattle Police Department after the World Trade Organization, most of those pictures showed officers in very heavy gear, full types of body armor, shin guards, elbow pads, helmets, masks, etc. And the first year, November of 2000, was the anniversary of WTO, and there was a pretty large protest with about 25,000 people. And but I asked the officers, rather than me being in a command post, I said, I'd like to be out there with you. And I'll be out there with you all day until this thing ends. But I think we should start with having our officers, just like me, in regular short sleeve uniform shirts with hats. Not that we didn't have heavy equipment and people available if things turned ugly out of sight and around the corner, but let's start out by being a part of this, right in the middle of some of this. And for almost the entire day and well into the evening, that went very well. And it was only at the end, in the evening, that tear gas had to be used, and about 100 or 125 people were arrested. But for almost 12 hours, the situation went very well.
What would you describe as your greatest takeaways from your long career in law enforcement?
Well, I think it's being able to hire people and to screen them and vet them for the right reasons. The reason to become a law enforcement officer isn't to put handcuffs on people and to drive fast. There are a lot of other reasons. Part of it is, what can you do to protect your community? How can you give something back? And but also do your job. And of course, part of doing your job is arresting people. It's making sure that people are safe. But a large part of doing your job is really also social service. If you look at the vast majority of calls to a 911 center, quite often it's about things that really aren't a violation of criminal law. It's about things that are kids not attending school, truants, kids hanging out on a street corner. Quite often the theme involves kids and some of the problems, but it isn't about there's a robbery in progress and the bank is being held up. It's a lot of other things. So you want to make sure that the people you're hiring understand that. After the academy in Seattle, I had the officers after graduation work in civilian clothes, plain clothes, blue jeans and t-shirts, and they would work in a variety of shelters. Homeless shelters, shelters for people with mental illness and drug problems, and youth runaway shelters. And I'd have them work not as a police officer, but to kind of understand that situation from the way that the social service people see it. And at first, some of the older officers said, gee, that's awful, they don't need to do that. But it continued on, it was a good program. But the side benefit was that the social service workers who had thought that the police officers were only there in uniform to answer a call and would make an arrest and take somebody out in handcuffed, they saw that the officers could be as caring and compassionate as they were.
Do you see yourself continuing to advocate for transparency or law enforcement reform in any capacity now that you're retired?
Well, now that I'm retired and don't feel like I'm retired, I'm going to continue in a variety of ways. I'm on a not-for-profit board that gives advice to community groups on how to talk to young people about the dangers of drugs, drug prevention programs that are realistic and based in science. I'm doing a lot of lecturing and teaching on both criminal justice reform issues, but also border security issues. And I don't see myself not continuing to advocate for the kinds of change that I see is needed and continues to be needed in these fields.
And is there any other message you'd like to convey to our readers?
No, just the opportunity to be here with you and to get this message out is important.
All right, well, thank you for being here with us.
Good.
This has been an interview with Gil Kerlikowske. For more interviews and articles, please check out our website at www.harvardpolitics.com.